Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you, featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
This is the Susan Brender Show, and I'm Susan Brender. Are you rushing from place to place? Is your to-do list keeping you up at night? It's easier to get caught up in the chaos of living and forget to pause and take a breath. At the Little Breathing Space, my guest today, who is Clarissa Hughes, says she shows you how to master a mindful life so that you can feel focused, calm, and content. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Clarissa Hughes. She's a mindful coach, author, speaker. A long corporate career taught her about the challenges of living mindfully and staying true to her values and purpose. She says, I'm passionate about mindfulness and compassion, which have been and continue to be the most transformative ways for staying calm, aware, alive, and aligned with what truly matters in our life. And so I want to welcome to the show Clarissa Hughes.
Oh, Susan, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I'm delighted to be here.
Clarissa, you're talking about things that when I was young and I think also my friends and people that I know, they never thought about things like mindfulness and a mindfulness coach. People just went by their day-to-day living, going to work, rushing all the time, taking care of their families, trying to make life as simple as it could. But it was always a little difficult because it was hard. It was hard to get jobs. It was hard to do all the things you wanted to do. But today, people like yourself talk about mindfulness. They talk about breathing. They talk about ways to be calm, aware, alive, aligned. What does that all mean?
Oh, that's a really good question here, Susan. I think it means giving ourselves space and time to gather our thoughts, to take some time out for our family and the things that are important, because we're always chasing, as you said. And I think it's that conscious moments that we say, I'm actually going to stop here and I'm going to do something that's good for me and that also is good for the people that really matter to me.
Yeah, but Clarissa, power. People love power. They love money. That seems to be the reason or the raison d'etre for a lot of people. They want to be strong, and very, what should I say? They want to just achieve a lot. And so they're working harder and harder. Young people today, if they're involved in the stock market, with hedge funds, with banks, as lawyers, they work like 20 hours a day. What do you attribute
And they do,
that
and then
to?
they burn out, Susan. I mean, they only can do that for a very short, focused time in their lives. We've got strings of corporate executives who are crashed and burned, or they work and they drop dead with a heart attack. And a lot of people realize now that although there is that power of chasing and that money chasing, a lot of those people are not very happy. Their relationships are not what they'd like to be, and their health certainly isn't what it would be if they took a little bit of a more paced thing. And I suppose it's where you place value in life, but I don't think there's any evidence that living at that pace for an extended time is really going to make you happy. And I think, or content with life.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a funny story, and I'm just curious if you've ever felt that you need to put yourself in this place. It makes me laugh just thinking about it. I bought this microphone, and this microphone is like you know what karaoke is, right? Japanese for singing, right?
Yep.
So I bought this microphone, and I went over to the library, and I got a lot of books with lyrics of different songs from all the different eras. And I find myself in the morning, I open up the microphone. It's got an echo on it. It's a really funny thing. And I find myself singing. And it transforms me. As I'm singing, I'm in the moment, and I'm it's transforming me in ways I can't even describe. You talk all about mindfulness. You talk about happiness. How do you achieve that for yourself?
Well, actually, I'm like you. One of the things I love to do is sing. So I sing in a choir, and we sing to well-known pop songs, and we dance. I don't think we're very good, but we have a fantastic time. And I actually do meditate as well, and I get those moments of quiet connection. You know, it's just that 20 minutes, half an hour when I'm really quiet and still and watching my own thoughts, allowing things just to come and go. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes, you know, my mind's everywhere, and sometimes I'm very still. But I have those moments every single day for myself.
You know, Clarissa, I love hearing how you stay in the moment and how you make yourself kind of create a situation where you're extremely happy. I'm curious, and I want our audience to know a little bit more about Clarissa Hughes, and then we're going to kind of jump and we're going to ask I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about the whole phenomenon of your life. But tell our audience a little story about Clarissa Hughes. You know, you remember there was a program on TV that used to say, who is this one? Who is that one? Who is Clarissa Hughes?
Well, Clarissa Hughes today is, as you said, a mindfulness coach who loves helping other people find that calm space in their lives and get their lives to be much more on track. But I wasn't always like that. I was a corporate person on that corporate treadmill. I had a to-do list. I think I ran my life off an Excel spreadsheet. And I was packing in everything, saying, yes, I can do this, I can do more, I can put my hand up, until one day I couldn't. And I burnt out, I was very unwell, and I was very unhappy as well. I was very lonely, and I put a lot into a corporate career. And yes, I had a lot of material things, but I think my soul was dead.
Wow. What do you attribute to that, Clarissa? Why did that happen to somebody like yourself, who sounds like such a positive person?
Well, I think life is quite challenging. I was a single mother, and I was living in Sydney, Australia at the time. I didn't have any family or support mechanisms around me. And I believed, and I'd been brought up to put my foot on the accelerator and go and push and drive and succeed and show the world I could. And I think I was very afraid of saying no. And I'm in my late 50s today, and I think at that stage of growing up, we were taught to put our hands up and say, yes, thank you very much for every opportunity. Don't be difficult at work, because people don't like difficult women in the office. And so you don't know how to say no.
Yeah, I hear you. Now, you started out doing corporate work. What kind of corporate work? And was there any situation that you experienced while you were doing that which was a little funny and which you kind of questioned because you said, what am I doing?
Oh, well, I was quite senior. I worked for some of the world's biggest corporations in the marketing department. I headed up all the consumer understanding and market research for some very big brands that people would really know, and one of them was Coca-Cola. So that's a brand that the whole world knows. So when you're quite senior there, you work pretty hard. Funny things about what am I doing here? I think there were times when I would turn up to meetings and I got the wrong time, the wrong date. I'd be saying, oh, how did that happen? Have I got this mixed up again? Very much. And that I started to realize mixing a lot of those sorts of things up, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The only thing is I'm glad to say I didn't get on a plane to go to the wrong city, but it wasn't far from it.
So even somebody like Clarissa Hughes has her issues too, but let's jump forward, because it's really interesting to know a little bit about happiness, to know a little bit about the things that you sort of make people think about. So the question that I have for you is, can we bring more mindfulness and happiness into our lives, or is this just an evasive kind of thing?
No, I think we can bring more mindfulness into our lives we can definitely all have the ability to come from what I would call the doing mode, where we're doing and it's head-driven, to a being mode where we are much more focused on our present experience. We're a little detached from the past and the future thinking, which drives a lot of what we do. And we just come into this moment, and we can do that simply. We can do that by going for a walk in nature. We can do it by meditating if we want to, by singing, by even cooking and being absorbed in something we enjoy doing. Doesn't have to be big and complicated, but when we do that, we're mindful, we're in the present moment, and for that little time, we let go of all that worrying and all those thoughts, and we feel better. We feel a bit calmer, and we feel a bit happier, because it's happening biologically. It's happening biologically to us when we do that.
Oh, is it really? Now, a lot of people have a predisposition toward different kinds of problems, such as taking drugs, drinking a lot, certainly finding themselves in depression and having a lot of anxiety because of all the issues going around in their lives and in the world. And you're saying that if you take a walk or you sing a little bit or you kind of just calm yourself down, that you can basically get rid of some of these things. Now, do you really believe that? And if so, again, I want to understand, and I want you to give us a definition of what you think happiness actually is.
I think that it depends on the extent of your addiction. If I work with a lot of psychologists and psychiatrists, and I know there are people whose level of mental unwellness requires a different kind of intervention. But a lot of us today are feeling anxious about situations, can even let that control our lives, or we can feel mildly to moderately depressed. And here in Sweden, where I live, there's a very famous and well-known psychiatrist, and he's very much about exercise 3 times a week, get outside in the sunlight, and he said that's going to make a huge difference to your mental state. So I think that when people like that are very prepared to stand up and back that, I'm kind of with him on that too, that we often can improve our mental health through good practices, sleeping well, some exercise. Those sorts of things can make a big difference to a person's level of anxiety and mild depression.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm going to tell you another little story about something that I'm experiencing. I volunteer for a group of senior citizens in a very interesting place. I'll even tell our audience, but it's irrelevant to a lot of people around the world. It's called the Wiseman Center. And every time I go to the Wiseman Center, I meet all ages, people in their 70s and their 80s, even in their 90s. And the ones that I notice that are the happiest people are the people who say, this is my situation. Most of them I meet are women, and they've lost their husbands. And what they do is they join other people in doing different things. And they're not ashamed to go over to people and say, listen, I need somebody to do something with, go to the movies, go out to dinner. And a lot of people don't understand that it's possible not to be lonely. I want to discuss loneliness with you because, a lot of people could be in a crowd and still be lonely. And if you gave them any kind of information, what would you tell them so that they can have the rest of their lives in a situation where they're happy and they don't feel lonely?
Yeah, and I think we know there's plenty of good evidence that loneliness makes us turn in on ourselves and look at our thoughts, and the thoughts then become real. They become stories in our heads, and we become very unhappy, and we can become very mentally unwell. But connection, getting in touch with other people, is fantastic. I think that's one of the things. Other people help other people. It's compassion for another person, and that is very, very good for us, both mentally and physically. So one of the things I think we can do is look for ways to connect with others through similar interests. But it's quite difficult. I think people are quite shut in their homes now, and I don't think that our new world with all its digital focus on our phones is making us feel less lonely. I think in fact young people are closing themselves off more than the older generation and living their life through a screen. So I think that's something we need to get people to put down their phones and get out and connect with people in real life, touch other people, hug other people, because that's good for us.
Oh, I love that. You're saying hugging. I remember, I'll tell you something interesting, Clarissa, as well, and I'm sure you experienced this as well, that years ago there was a person in Korea, actually started in Korea, where he had an organization where he he asked people rather to lie on the floor and put their heads on people's bellies and start to laugh. Oh, yeah. And laughing is contagious, right?
Oh, yes, we like to laugh. It's good. Fantastic. I love laughter. I think that it's, every single day to have an opportunity to laugh, even if it's only small, is so positive for us. Because all these wonderful positive hormones rush up, like the serotonins and the endorphins. They counterbalance all the stress hormones, the cortisols and adrenaline. The body feels calmer. And the other good thing about a good belly laugh, if you can get one in, is it kind of massages your organs, so you get a bit of extra benefit from it.
Yeah. Yesterday, do you know anything about Pilates, for example?
I do. I'm a Pilates fan, big one.
Okay, tell us why, and I'll tell you why I found it very interesting as well. But I'd like to know why you think it's an interesting thing, and tell our audience a little bit of what is Pilates, because they may not know.
Well, it's a great form of exercise that really builds the strength and core. It's based on yoga and a bit more. It's very good for building up your muscles, for toning your body, and you can do it on the floor, on a mat, which is pretty hard work. It's sort of exercises where you're moving your arms and legs in coordination. It's good for your balance. And you can use also props and machines to do that as well. So it's a very, very beneficial form of exercise. I think you have to try it. You have to look it up to see it. It's kind of a visual thing.
Well, you mentioned also yoga, and I know people know a lot about yoga, but they may not know some things that that also create a situation of mindfulness.
It does. I think because you're in the moment, because you're breathing, yoga and Pilates have a big focus on the breath, and the breath is very mindful. It's a free tool, I think, that we have to help us to bring ourselves to be aware of our body, settle our thoughts, quite frankly. So both yoga and Pilates are good for that. And also because, quite frankly, some of the exercises require you to do a lot of balancing. It's a bit hard to do that if you're thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow or what you did yesterday, because you won't stand up very straight or long in either exercise.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to the whole notion that even something like breathing, nobody thinks about breathing usually. You just breathe. But if you are in a state of kind of mindfulness, you have to pay attention to your breathing. Is that an easy thing to do, and how do you do it? If you walk me through it a little bit, Clarissa, I'd be very appreciative. I want our audience to know about breathing, because breathing really does a lot for the mind, for the body, you name it. It does it.
I think being able just to focus for just a few moments on your breath, one breath at a time, without doing anything with it. You don't have to do anything strange. You don't have to change your breathing, but you can just observe it. Notice the in-breath and the out-breath. Notice how you're breathing, how it feels, and how it makes you feel. Very simply, just observing that in and out breath, and maybe putting your hand on where you feel the breath most strongly. It could be on your chest, could be on your belly, or you could just notice it in and out the nostrils. It's not really important. I think the important thing is just to watch the breath coming and going, and you can feel very, very calm.
Now, when you say breathing, again, do you breathe through your nose or do you breathe through your mouth? How do you get the breath out as well? Is it nose,
well,
mouth?
I like to teach people to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. I think that's one of the easiest ones. Different teachers do different things. I mean, if it's very hard for you to breathe in and out of your nose, then you have to breathe in and out of your mouth. But generally, if you can breathe in very gently and calmly through the nose and out through the mouth, you'll just notice that it has a great effect. The only time I would say to you is if you're a person that has a lot of panic attacks or you're very highly anxious, then deep breathing isn't a good exercise to do. It can make people feel a bit more anxious. And then it's better to do things that focus on objects and experiences away from your body.
Is hypnosis something that you think is important as well?
Hypnosis?
Correct.
I don't know very much about it, to be honest. I believe that it's possible. I have friends who are hypnotherapists. I have never been to a hypnotherapist myself, but I know people who have had great experiences with it.
Now, if you had to recommend a daily mindfulness habit that contributes to one's well-being, what would that be?
My biggest technique is to say, take a break before you need it. And it's one of the things to do is to set every half an hour or so, if it's possible, set yourself a reminder that you're going to pause for about 1 or 2 minutes. You could use that time to stretch a little bit. If you're sitting down, get up and have a stretch. Take a few deep breaths and just observe how you feel. Sort of scan your body from the top of your head to your toes. Notice how your body feels. Notice any sensations, any tension, and see if you can just breathe a little bit to let go of that. And then just carry on with your day. And if you can pepper your day regularly with those kinds of short breaks, it builds up. We're giving ourselves moments to be mindful without having to do anything strange or very different from what we would do in daily life. It's just being mindful to remember to do this regularly.
Yeah. Now, interestingly enough, Clarissa, I was in China, also in Japan, and when I got up in the morning, I went out of my hotel, I walked down the streets a couple, and there were people very early in the morning doing something called Tai Chi, and they were moving with a certain kind of grace. I want to call it grace. And you could see that they were just thinking about where their arms were, where the legs were. They were moving around. What a stunning thing. Have you ever seen and have you promoted that as well, the exercise, if you will, called Tai Chi?
Absolutely. Well, I've done both Tai Chi and its more meditative practice, which is Qigong. And Qigong's a bit slower, and they actually use that in hospitals in China to heal people alongside modern medicine and Chinese medicine.
Really?
And it's beautiful. It's very, 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 very slow movement, and done with the breath helps the mind to focus. And some of the movements are meant to work on the Chinese medicine system, so they're supposed to energize certain points in the body to allow the energy, the qi as they call it, to flow more fully through the body. So each movement is very specifically directed to a particular organ or a particular energy point in the body.
How is it that the Chinese or the Japanese understood this for a long time, that you can actually do something like we just discussed, Tai Chi, and it would make you feel better? You know, we in this country, in America, and in a lot of the Western countries, all we do is, you know, as I said, we run to work, we work all day, we come home, we eat, we sleep, and we don't think about the possibilities that we can actually heal our bodies and also make our minds better. why is it that they know about that and we don't?
I think we once upon a time knew those sorts of things in some way, but lost them. We didn't preserve them inside our culture, and we became very obsessed about science. And science is fantastic, and I have to be careful what I say at home because my partner's a physicist. but I think we became very detached from the natural world, detached from our bodies and listening to our bodies, understanding that, below the neck is this wonderful system that works for us. But when we're not in touch with our bodies, listening to them, then we don't listen to the signals that the body gives us. And the Chinese have kind of preserved that, as have the Indians with their Ayurvedic systems and yoga, the connection to the body and a more spiritual side of life, because there's a lot of spirituality in breath and breathing, has preserved, I think, for them, a way of staying more well. But I think in modern China and some of these, it's disappearing a bit, because they're getting very caught up in buying stuff and a very materialistic world, and not as many young people practice Tai Chi and Qigong as you see. It's a lot of older people.
Yes. And they also dance. An interesting thing, you watch them in the morning and they're dancing, and they're doing ballroom dancing, older men, older women, and you could see that on their face, the joy of doing something like that. And that's the other thing about joy. We need to find a way to feel more joyful, don't you think?
I think we do, and I think that a lot of that has got to come from doing simple things. It's not reliant on buying happiness, but joy comes from inside ourselves, from little things that lift us, singing, dancing, enjoying time in nature, hugging your grandchildren, colouring on the floor with them. That's joy.
Yeah. So if people want to get in touch with you, Clarissa, do you have a website? Do you have a way for them to get in touch with you? And do you have any kind of materials that you would like them to look at, like books or any other pamphlets, or how do they find Clarissa?
Well, they can find me first on my website, and my website is thelittlebreathingspace.com. And on there, people can download a free meditation, and they will be able also to download some free materials. They can download a chapter of my book, The Mindful Menopause, which is on Amazon as well. And they can also download some little infographics and other tools and tips that I have on there.
I really forgot to ask you one question, which I think is very important, and that is, you just mentioned the word menopause, which, sets you apart in certain ways from other people who sort of advocate for mindfulness, because you're talking about women who are their bodies are changing, their minds are changing, life can be very difficult at that time, they could go into a depression, various things, and you have a formula, it sounds like, for them to follow. So would you just tell our audience how you deal with that and what that is?
What I do with this, in my book, The Mindful Menopause, I talk about how menopause can be a transformative journey. It's not a disease. I'm very clear on that, and I think I have some colleagues who work alongside me who would say the same. But something that mindfulness can help you, alongside other medications, etc., if you require them, to find a way to calm the body and the mind, to be able to work with our difficult emotions, and more importantly, to bring acceptance and compassion to this change. Because it's very big. We're going from being a reproductive woman in a society that's obsessed with youth to being very different. And we're having to have some mental support, emotional support, which mindfulness gives us, to say, I'm accepting this change, I'm still beautiful, I'm still me, and cultivating this compassionate image of ourselves so we can actually transition with less criticism, more kindness, and a sense of being aware that, yes, we may be having difficult things, but these things will pass. And in the meantime, coming into the present moment can help me, as opposed to allowing my thoughts to raise off and my body to be burning up and looking like a lobster and all the other things that happen to us, which are not fun, but being able to know that it's a moment in our lives and that we can walk this journey. And that in what we talked about with loneliness, in connecting with others, really, can we connect to others? Can we have people who can support us? And can we openly share what's going on with us? Instead of screeching at, our children put some dishwashing, didn't put it away, we're screaming at them or whatever, and they think, God, mother's gone off sleep and she's gone to this monster. Well, they do. They come look at you and go, what's going on? And your husband looks at you and goes, oh my God, what just went down here? We'd be able to open dialogue and allow them into the journey, because then they want to help us and support us.
Yes, that's really true. Well, today my guest has been Dr. Clarissa Hughes. She's a mindful coach, a speaker, an author of the book called The Little Breathing Space. And I want all my audience to really get that book and learn how to be very special, happy people who have a technique that she makes available in the book to give yourself a little space, a little time, a little kind of joyfulness. And I want to tell you, Dr. Clarissa Hughes, I really believe very strongly that the things that you told our audience can be a wonderful way for the changes that we need in all societies. Now, I always like to give my guest the last word. Is there something that you would like to tell our audience?
I just think the one thing we can do is know that calm is just a breath away.
Well, words of wisdom. Thank you again.
Thank you, Susan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.